I turned a SSERAFIM song into a fully playable video game. This is not a concept, this is not a prototype, this is a complete fan game built by just one person, with custom characters, original levels, and their music converted into 8-bit. This is how a K-pop song became a fully playable fan-made game, and how close I came to losing everything. This all started with a YouTube video, an 8-bit version of SSERAFIM's Spaghetti. And one simple question: what if this wasn't just an animation? What if this was playable? That question turned into a decision. I wanted to turn this idea into a real game. Therefore, I chose a classic 2D platformer. Something simple, something anyone could understand and play. But simplicity can be dangerous. If it is too simple, it's boring, and if it is too complex, people won't even try it. Each level had one clear goal: collect all the ingredients to cook the perfect spaghetti. And honestly, as a fan of the group, this idea just felt perfect. Once the idea was clear, it was time to actually make the game. Before levels, before enemies, before art, I first focused on one thing: movement. Because if the character doesn't feel good to control, nothing else matters. And at first, it didn't. Jumping felt weird. Movement was boring. So I kept adjusting the movement. I tuned the jump until it felt responsive, added a dash to give the player more control, and introduced a forward throwing attack so that the player had more options to progress throughout each level. Then, I work on the enemy. To match the song's theme, I turn food into enemies. Tomatoes explode when you get too close. Spaghetti snakes chase the player. Each enemy behaves differently to keep things interesting. Then came the playable characters. There are 5 of them, each one representing a SSERAFIM member, and each character has an additional skins that Fearnuts will immediately recognize. But this meant more work than I originally planned, because I animated everything by hand. Every character, every skin, every animation, every single frame had to be drawn, checked, or adjusted manually. Altogether, just the character animation took me an entire week to finish. And honestly, it was the most exhausting part of the whole project. But seeing each member come to life inside my game made it worth the effort. Once the characters and enemies were already playable, I moved on to level design. Before building the levels inside the engine, every stage started on paper. I didn't jump straight into placing platform. I started with ideas, because turning ideas into good playable levels is harder than it sounds. On paper, everything made sense: where the player runs, where they jump, where they fall, and where they succeed. But once I rebuilt the level inside the engine, something became clear. What looks fun on paper doesn't always feel fun to play. So I started adjusting: shorter jumps, longer platform gaps, different enemy placement, and where collectibles are located. Everything being placed by hand. Then came the level visuals. Each level needed its own identity. Different colors, different backgrounds, different moods. Even though it's trying to be a retro game, I wanted every stage to feel alive. Not just playable, but memorable. Level design isn't just about how things look, it's also about rhythm. When to let the player breathe, when to challenge them, and when to surprise them. So I tested the flow for each level and how players will interact with it over and over again. Most of the time, breaking my own levels before the players even try. In total, I built 7 levels. Each one introduces something new: a new mechanic, a new enemy, or a new challenge. The goal was simple: make the game easy to learn but fun to master. Even with all the testing and tweaking, this part was surprisingly fast. The level visuals and layout took me about 3 days to finish, and somehow it became the most fun part of the project. Seeing everything come together, turning rough ideas into actually playable spaces, the game was starting to take shape. Then I moved on to the menus. Just like the game levels, I designed them first on paper. I wanted them to feel simple, clean, and easy to understand. No confusion, just clear choices. Every transition and animation was there to guide the player, so anyone could pick up the game, easily understand, and start playing instantly. And for the first time, the game didn't feel like a prototype anymore. It finally felt real. The music is a huge part of the game's identity. I wanted it to feel nostalgic but still recognizable. I couldn't just lower the quality and call it 8-bit. So I followed a tutorial I found on YouTube and learned the proper way to do it. First, I converted the original song into a MIDI file, stripping it down to pure notes. No effects, no polish, just melody and structure. Then I ran that MIDI file through a program called GXSCC, which uses sound fonts inspired by all consoles. This program converted the song to sound like it always belonged in a retro game. The original track worked, but it didn't translate perfectly into 8-bit. So I had to tweak some notes, clean certain frequencies, and simplify parts of the melody to make it sound clearer in that style. Small changes, but they made a big difference. I did this for 3 of the most recent songs. Different, Spaghetti, Perilous. Hearing them inside the game was one of the most satisfying moments of the entire project. At that point, everything was finally coming together. The visuals, the gameplay, and the sound. Of course, nothing ever works perfectly, especially in game development. Some enemies broke, physics stopped making sense, and certain mechanics completely fell apart. Sometimes in funny ways, sometimes not so much. Some of these bugs still made no sense to me, but fixing them was the only way forward. Little by little, the game became more stable, more playable, until I finally felt confident enough to keep pushing. And just when the project finally felt stable, everything stopped. There was a power outage right in the middle of saving. When I opened the project again, the game didn't load. Files were corrupted, the engine couldn't recognize the data, and I had no backup. For a moment, I thought it was over. GameMaker didn't know what to do, so I had to step in manually, fixing the game files, guessing what still existed, removing what was broke. I didn't recover everything, but I recovered most of the project to still finish it. Once the core of the game was working again, I added sound effects to everything. Jumps, dashes, attacks, enemies, UI, menus. With sound in place, the game finally defined its personality. It felt unique, it felt intentional. I also added a language selector, English or Korean. It was a small touch, but an important one. I wanted more players to feel welcome inside the game. Sound effects, language options, small details like that made the game feel complete. And once it reached that point, there was no turning back. This was the final stretch. No more big features, no more experiments, only polish. Fixing tiny bugs, adjusting enemy timing, and smoothing animations that fell slightly off. Things most players will never notice, but things they will definitely feel. Then came balancing, making sure each level flow as intended, that the difficulty ramped it up naturally. I played the game from start to finish over and over and over again, not as a developer, but as a player, checking every jump, every enemy, every level, until there was nothing left to fix. No new idea, no game-breaking bugs, just a finished game. That's when it really hit me. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to adjust. For the first time since I started, I could just play and enjoy. And that's when I knew the game was finally done. After weeks of work, this project is finally complete. What started as a small idea became a fully playable game. A game you can actually play right now. The link is waiting for you in the description. This is a free, fan-made game inspired by SSERAFIM. You don't need to be a gamer to play it. It's simple, it's accessible, and it was made for everyone, but especially for fear nuts. This project is not for profit. It was made purely out of passion. This game exists because of how much this group inspires me. So, when the next album or comeback arrives, Maybe this game could grow with it. I will always be waiting for what is next for SSERAFIM. I hope you enjoy playing this game as much as I enjoyed making it. Thanks for watching.